Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Red Couch Theology podcast, where Alex is not joining, but Jessica Rust is joining.
Hi.
And I preach the message.
Yeah.
So she's going to host a little bit, but maybe some of you don't know who she is and what she does around here at South. And so I'm going to start by hosting. I didn't tell her I was going to do this, and ask her, who are you? It's been a while since you've been on the show. And what are you doing now? Because it's different.
Yeah. So last time I was on the show, I was the director of pastoral care. So helping meet the needs of the community, whatever the forms those might take. And now I'm one of our co-pastors of connection and formation. So from the first interactions and steps into our community towards building roots, making friendships, finding your place at South, and continuing on your steps to grow in the way of Jesus with the heart of Jesus all the way through alongside Angela Dunn.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm super grateful to have both Angela and Jessica on this connection formation team. And technically this podcast falls in that department. So I think it's super fun. You might see them pop up a little bit more, especially when our fearless leader is frolicking abroad.
Yeah.
So kind of fun. I'm also trying to produce the show, so I'm going to quick change this and get it so that it's possible for me to share my Bible software in case we need it. But yeah, how things going?
Good.
For you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, summertime.
All right. Well, I'll pass the hosting back off to you then.
Great. Yeah. Well, so for those who didn't get to hear this week's sermon already, they might not know we started a new series called Anchored. So once you have everything pulled up on your computer, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what this series is and why this is what we're focusing on this summer?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of fun for me because this is the first time I've ever written a series,
right?
And the premise for a series. So the little backstory for that is Alex typically travels overseas to see his family in Europe in the summertime, and it costs a lot of money to do that. So when they go for a few weeks. It doesn't make sense to go there for a couple days. So as a result, I end up the last 2 summers, I've been able to preach a couple in a row. And this time he said, well, why don't you just write the whole series for even if you don't preach all of them? And so it was an opportunity I hadn't taken advantage of in the past. And so as I was praying about 6 months ago, I was on a run, and summer series, you guys maybe you don't care about this, but little mechanism behind the scenes of what it means to be a preacher regularly and running a church. Summertime is a tricky place to put series because people are traveling like crazy. And so I would have loved in so many ways just of how I'm wired to do a book study or something like that, just because there's a lot of peace in my mind knowing that what are you teaching this week? The next verse or the next section.
Yeah.
That would have been easier for me. But because it's a summer series, I felt like the messages needed to not build on each other as fully or not necessarily. And so I was like, do I do this? And you can do Psalms sometimes, you can do Proverbs sometimes, but the messages need to be a little bit more standalone. So I was pondering and wrestling through it, and I was out for a run and thinking about our community, just scattering around and on vacations and visiting families in the summers. And the idea popped in my head as I was jogging along that I hope that our community is a place where people feel like this draw to, even when they're not here, where they feel like that's my home, that I'm anchored there. And that word anchored popped in my mind. And I was like, well, maybe is there anything there? And I honestly just kept praying and asking the Lord about that. So that word anchored popped in my mind as more like a longing for a community that South would feel like a place where people could put down roots and felt like a ballast in their soul, as it were. And then the other thing that I was pondering is how some of the most important relationships in my life, like my relationship with my wife, for example, they are almost by design reduce my personal freedom and increase my general formation and like long-term good
Mhm.
for my own soul. And so I just sort of pondered that a little bit. And then I went to some study time that week and started noticing there's a lot of these things throughout the scriptures where God actually limits our freedoms intentionally for our good. And then, so that's where the original idea came from
Great.
for the series. So I don't know if that fully answered all of your questions, but
Yeah.
and then as I continued to study for the last 6 months, it just started coming out everywhere. And when something's on your mind, you start to notice it everywhere. And we are humans are the kinds of creatures that need limitations. And so in order for us to thrive, we don't thrive with maximum freedom, actually. So that's what the series is getting at.
So this first week was on being anchored in community.
Yeah.
So why did you see community as something that we need to be anchored in? Why choose to start with that?
Oh man, did I choose the right one to start with? That's a different question. I don't know. There was a little bit of a flip of the coin for which one to start with. But part of the point of the series was that if anyone came in and out of the series, all of these anchors are going to be beneficial. So if you miss a few or whatever, fine. Why did I choose that to start? Partially because that was the seed of where the series came from, is this prayer that like, I hope when people are traveling, they know they've got this safe place to go home to where they feel anchored. And that's what it means to be part of a community. And so that's the main reason why I started there. That a healthy, Christ-centered community has this ability to sort of anchor your soul to goodness, to rhythm, to common worship, to all of these different kinds of things. And so that's why I started there. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What does it look like to be anchored in community then? Is it just like, it means you've picked a place? It means you're showing up every week? Is there like boxes to check, or is it a little bit more
all
nebulous
those
than
things?
that?
Definitely boxes to check. If you guys haven't been checking your boxes, you're in sin. So no,
Yeah,
I'm just
that's
joking.
exactly what we want you to get out of
We just want to guilt
everything
and
we do.
shame you into being good. That's what it's about here. So no, I'm just joking, obviously. But so let me just sort of summarize through this passage. The passage that we looked at was this First Corinthians 12, which it's this section in First Corinthians 12 is an illustration of something he's talking about related to unity in the church in Corinth. And so what he says it means to be anchored to community is that you're part of a body, and every part of the body needs the other parts in order to be a whole body, obviously. And so it's a really powerful illustration that's also really accessible and easy. Like the hand can't say to the eye, I don't need you, all this kind of language that Paul uses as this is an illustration. So what's it mean to be anchored in community? It means you have to acknowledge that you're a part of a larger entity, and then embrace that as something that's for your good. And that means you can't just run off and do whatever you want and still thrive. Like, yeah, you can amputate an arm. It's not going to thrive. You can, there's parts of the body that if you amputate, you can literally not live. And the part that's amputated always dies. Now, ultimately, Christ is the head of the church. We know from other Paul's writings, all those sorts of things. And so what it means to be part of the body and to acknowledge that is to recognize by design, human beings are not meant to function properly in isolated spaces. And that's very counterintuitive to American culture, but it's just how we are made as creatures. And so to deny it is to deny God's design for you as a human being. So practically speaking, to get at your question, what's that mean? It means the acknowledgement that that's who you are by design, and then a commitment to engage that reality in some healthy ways. Are there hard, fast rules? You have to show up every single time and all those sorts of things. No, we're also individuals. This is the complexity of reading the scriptures. There's all these tensions. You're an individual and you're part of a whole.
Right.
Which this text emphasizes.
Right.
Like, actually, if you look at the structure of it, there is a little bit of a chiastic structure here where Paul goes like...
What's chiastic mean?
So, yeah, thank you. Sorry. Now I'm just rambling all this exciting stuff that I studied. So it's not a full chiasm, but the chiastic structure is like, in this case, it's a little bit more of an A. If you think of an outline on a paper that you write or something like that, or an outline of an argument, you have like bullet point A and then sub point B, C, and so forth. Well, a chiasm is sort of an A, B, C, B, A. So it like goes in and out. Now, this isn't a full chiasm. It's actually just more of an A-B conversation. So he makes, what do I mean by that? So it's like, if you were to put it on an outline, I wish I had drawn up for you, but if you were to put it on an outline, it's like A, point B, repeat of point B, back to point A.
And the repeated part in the middle is like the real meat of the argument.
Yeah.
Like, this is the part that he really wants you to get and focus in on.
Totally. Now, which is why this isn't a full chiasm, because there's only 4. So there's no middle.
Yeah.
But
usually it's that C part that's really the hear this piece.
So this isn't a true chiasm, but what it is it's not even an ancient structure. We use this today too.
Mm-hmm.
Chiasms are much more of an ancient structure that's designed where the main point's in the middle, like you said.
Right.
But in this case, it's a repetitive structure trying to emphasize that 2 different things both need to be prioritized.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes A, B, B, A. And the A is you're an individual, and that's good. Yeah. Hold that. That's a huge, important thing. B, you can't survive without being part of the whole. B, again, you can't survive without being part of the whole. All the individuals are important. So it's a way of Paul saying 2 things at the same time that feel like they're almost in conflict.
Right.
But to try and force you to deal with both realities simultaneously, which that's actually really hard for the human brain to do, is to retain seemingly contradictory ideas in the same space.
Yeah. We don't like tension.
Totally.
Ideas. Yeah.
And so that's part of why Paul does this. He's trying to say individualism is really important. Like, he's not trying to say everyone has to be identical. He emphasizes it in this passage by saying, like, you might be a hand, you might be an eye, you might, so all the uniqueness, every individual is unique. And then over and over again, going back, oh, by the way, they're all useless without the whole.
Right.
Everyone, so it allows him to say both at the same time, which is really kind of a cool way of thinking about it. So
yeah.
Anyway, so I don't remember what the original question was, but
practically, what does it look like to be part of the community? Where we started with.
So that's why I got off on that rabbit trail. But it's that you do have uniqueness to you.
Yeah.
And then 2, that uniqueness is designed to function inside of a whole.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the y'all-ness of scripture, and how most of the time we take it as a me, but it's actually being addressed to the community and to the whole.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's where we really flourish and come alive.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't know, maybe the controversial, I don't know if anyone caught it, but the semi-controversial statement I made related to the y'all is that the Spirit, the work of the Spirit, the gifts of the Spirit, and even earlier in 1 Corinthians, is given to the community, not to the individual, at least in Corinthians. And I was told growing up, like, God gave me the Holy Spirit. And yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And so there, again, this tension. Well, is it given to individuals or is it given to the church? And I think the scripture's answer is yes.
Yeah. It's both.
But I think the way that Paul would actually think about it, because Paul doesn't really tend to think as individualistic as we do in the West. I think the way he would describe it is the gifts of the Spirit that indwells you only functions and is empowered when it works inside the context of the y'all or the whole. Which I made some statements about that on Sunday. Like, maybe if you don't feel empowered, maybe if you don't feel like you're actually living to, it's because you're trying to exercise that gifting or expect the Spirit to be fully awake in an autonomous space. Mm-hmm. That's very anti-American.
Yeah.
You know,
and we're not necessarily used to putting that into practice necessarily. Like, yep. And some of us don't even know enough of what it means about, like, what is my spiritual gift? Who am I really? How am I wired? To even begin to think about, well, and what would I bring to the community?
Yeah. Yep. So that's a fascinating point. And so inherently the scriptures teach that you are a unique member designed to fit inside of this whole.
Yeah.
So there's two problems with that. One, like you were just saying, that I didn't even really address. Some of us don't even know what that means. Like, what is the gift?
Right.
But the other side of that is that is the formation side. Like, we might, as we're trying to grow spiritually, a lot of time in the West is given to how to do that as an individual.
Yeah. There's so many resources of
like
all the
prayer, read the Bible, all these things. You'll go for a walk, meditate. There's just a litany of things. And we're like, oh yeah, I'm tracking. And I think the texts like this hint at that's insufficient. You can't do full-fledged, thriving spiritual formation outside of community.
Yeah.
And there's, I think that the New Testament shouts in the face of that. That's just not an option, because the Spirit doesn't fully awaken in the soul outside of the y'all. So, yeah, I guess in that front, yeah, you have lots of things to think through there. What am I made for? And remember that as you're answering that question, part of the answer is that the gift is meant to be expressed inside of the community.
Right. And I think there's a challenge in there for everyone in the community of, there's a balance between, okay, well, you need to participate, but as a community, you also need to invite, right? And it's not just, okay, well, suck it up and find your place. Like, just try harder, good luck.
Yeah.
But you can't also just wait for eventually someone to pull you in and put you in a place. You need to take those steps to find your spot in the community, find who your community is, and make those roots be anchored. But also the community needs to be actively aware of helping people find their place. Totally. And connecting with others and issuing those invitations and welcoming people in. And if as a community we're not doing that, then we as a body are also failing the members of our community.
Yeah, which I think, like, if I pull this up on the past, I think this text actually deals with both of those kind of tensions. Right. If I go text here, if you get down here, this first movement, so this first paragraph, he's basically like, he gives his 30,000 foot thesis. We're all unity, we're all part of the body, but we have uniqueness. Mm-hmm. And then 15, he says, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body. Or because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body. And so that's one of the challenges, is saying, like, I don't have much to offer. Mm-hmm. And then later on, it's a different tone of voice. The I cannot say, I don't need you. So there's like this sense of autonomy that I want to protect. I don't need anyone. This sort of like I'm an island kind of concept. And all throughout, what he's saying is that, no, on both sides, the community itself needs to invite all the parts in.
Mhm.
They can't say, I don't need you. And then if you don't think you have to offer, you have to lean in. So as the individual has to lean into the community, knowing I do have something to offer. So there's the effort on the individual part. And then from the community perspective, the community has to say, I actually do need them.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this handshake taking place in this text. So
To use a body phrase.
yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
No pun intended. So what would you say to someone who has had difficult, painful experiences with community, and yet they're hearing, but you need community, you need to be anchored? How do you balance some of those things?
Yeah, I spent a bunch of time thinking about this because this is actually one of the, well, Paul addresses this in this text too. He acknowledges difficulties and the massive irony of who he's writing this letter to.
Right. It's a, by definition, difficult community.
Yeah, it is not a healthy church community in this stage. Like there's literally some people are feasting and getting drunk during like communion time in their worship gatherings, and other people are starving to death.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not sharing. Like that's not exactly a recipe for this like super life-giving, everybody's part of the whole.
Like that's not what your community should look like.
That's who he's talking to. So with that said, but I think that was the lesson that I tried to communicate on Sunday is this is just how it is. You need community. There's a ton of pain with that. So but we can't deny reality of how we're designed as creatures. So keep trying. That may mean some shifts where maybe there's some justification for you needing to find a different set of community or something like that. But to just tap out and just say, I'm not doing this game anymore. I'm going to become an island and alone. And I'll do my own spiritual formation. That isn't an option according to the New Testament. So what do you do with that pain? I think you wrestle through it with a good father who sees that, who was stabbed in the back by some of his closest friends in so many ways, who was denied by Peter. All like Jesus knows what it's like to be in difficult relationships, or God in general, like his people who he gives everything for and loves and cares for, and they just deny him and they make mistakes and they disobey him. They disengage relationship over and over again. God knows what it's like, and running to his heart and saying, how do I navigate this forward? Mm-hmm. For me, I felt that so many times in different seasons here at the community. I have people who will leave for reasons that I think are petty or whatever. As I've evaluated the emotions of that, the reason it hurts so much is because I loved them and I wanted to be in relationship with them, and their departure was painful. And I completely understand the tendency. And I've had years, even while I've been here at South, where I shut down. And then God's kindness, he sort of healed some wounds and pointed out the reality of how I'm supposed to function and invited me back into the community game. I don't know if that fully answers your question. Do you have what do you think? Do you have like moments where you've had to, especially like as an introvert, maybe like, how do you do that?
How do you not shut down community? Well, you shut down after you go home on Sunday.
There you go.
I mean, just as a general, I think there are moments and times where the answer is you need to leave, right? Like I personally have had that moment of leaving a church community because it was not healthy or safe really for me to stay there. But that's also and that was done with lots of prayer and lots of conversation and genuine effort to try to make change where I could. and discernment and a sense of the spirit of, no, it is time for you to go.
Yeah.
Which was then affirmed by, lots of relationships of like, yeah, I wondered why you stayed so long.
Yeah.
Like, well, but like the point is like, it's not like, and you don't do that lightly, right?
Yes.
Sometimes the answer is yes, it's time to go. But not just from I'm over it. I'm out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also took time to like rebuild a healthy sense of what does it mean to be in community and how can I fully function as a member of the body
Yeah.
in a new space. Which in my case took some counseling. Just to plug for counseling, which I'll probably do every time I'm on the podcast. But yeah, but also I didn't give up on church or the concept of church when I left that particular community. And I was looking for, okay, well, where then could I find that healthier experience of community where I can anchor in? It wasn't, okay, cutting ties with community and I have nothing else or no one else that I'm rooted to. It was, well, then where can I anchor instead?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. The other thing I want to just acknowledge, which I didn't feel like I had time to like spell out fully on Sunday, is a lot of times like when we talk about community and even the language I used on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
definitely would risk that South Fellowship churches, meaning several hundred people, 300 to 500 people who tend to gather on a semi-regular basis on Sunday morning, that's your community. There's different sizes of community. So
Right.
like, yes, that's the local expression of South that we've kind of united under some common vision, some common worship, some common language about trying to live in the way of Jesus with the heart of Jesus. But more of what I'm talking about, I think that even would be a little bit more typical to Paul's day is slightly smaller subsets of that community.
Right.
So that means maybe more think of like a larger group of 20 people that you tend to connect with within that larger church body, or a life group of 6 to 8 people, or that core sort of folks. And all throughout history, studies have been done and research has been done around human transformation, and healthy followers of Jesus tend to have these increasingly larger concentric circles of relationships if they're healthy.
Yeah.
Usually there's a 2 to 3 who are like covenant friendships. And then there's sometimes these aren't hard, fast rules, of an 8 to 20 people who become part of that larger, like doing life together. You kind of know what's going on in their world and their life with their kids and their struggles, that sort of thing. And then there's maybe a larger community that would call South.
Right.
And then the larger one that we don't even think about oftentimes is the global church of God.
Yeah.
Around the world. So when I say community, I'm tending to think of a little bit more one of the smaller entities like that. So I didn't get a chance to say that on Sunday, but I think it's important. It's not expected that you know every single person's name at South Fellowship Church on a Sunday morning. It's just not a possibility. And you're not going to know all of their kids.
If you want to try to learn as many as possible, like, great, go for it.
Yeah, go for it. Alex might know almost all of you, but you're not going to know every single deep pain and sorrow that they have and all those sorts of things. So, to get back to your question around, how do you engage when it's painful and stuff? I think the answer is just acknowledge that. My last point in the message was that the struggle is a feature; it's not a bug.
Right.
So part of the struggle is what God wants for you. And that's the premise of this whole series. is that relinquishing certain freedoms is healthy for the human condition. Now, that has boundaries to it. We just talked
Right.
about some of them. There are good reasons why you could leave a local church. There are good reasons why why a marriage might not survive, and the scriptures have this ability of retaining all of these tensions.
Yeah. There are some hills to die on.
Yep,
Right.
absolutely. And so, um, but like you said, to do it not lightly, and to recognize that some of the tension is by God's design
Mhm.
to shape you as a person in his image. Without that struggle, without that tension, without relinquishing some of your rights, you can't truly thrive as a person. And back to your comment about counseling, that's why a lot of like a wise counselor might be what you need to go deeper in community, in the larger community.
Right.
And I know that's true for me. There's been moments where I've used all the things that I know how to do, and I'm still running into this roadblock
Mhm.
in my own soul where I can't engage this environment or this environment well anymore, and I can't figure out why.
Yeah.
Sometimes a counselor is or a wise mentor, older person, or whatever it may be, might be the person that needs to step into your life and say, help you deal with some of your stuff
Mhm.
so that you can enter into community again wisely. So,
Yeah.
but there's no promise of it being easy.
Right.
I wish there was, but I think that that's actually part of the point.
Mhm.
So,
So have you had any experiences of community that you really feel like for you has kind of been a guiding um a signpost, I guess, or a guidepost of, yeah, like there were moments where it felt like this was what God meant community to be. That's kind of helped you build this understanding of just the value of it.
oh man, yes, I feel really spoiled because a lot of my community is the staff. That's not true for a lot of pastors, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of church employees, for lack of a better term. Uh, uh, but I've had the gift of being pretty close friends with my boss for the last two, the lead pastor, previous lead pastor, and then with Alex. I think I don't know if you can tell from the show, but like he and I have a good friendship, and
Yeah.
we talk about life, we talk about our kids, we talk about our fears, we talk about our struggles, and so in a lot of ways, like I think of Alex as one of my close friends that I feel I can be vulnerable with. That's a weird gift. Um, and then I have other people on staff. Um, so, but what it's meant for me, there's been some significant moments over the last 14, 15 years here where I was in crisis, whether it was burnout, whether it was struggles at home, financial struggles, whatever they may be, where some important people in my life here on staff kind of held that knowledge fully. They knew what was going on, and they loved me anyway. They gave me freedoms to take more time off.
Mhm.
They gave me all those sorts of things. So, and that's where I felt a lot of that community. I've
Mhm.
also been a part of a few different life groups, and different seasons of those different groups had that same thing to offer, where they saw all the dark corners of my soul, at least the ones that I discovered to that point, and knew about those things in me, knew what it looked like when Aaron was grouchy and being a jerk, and accepted me anyway.
Mhm.
That's probably one of the most important parts of true community, is to be who you actually are without a mask and still be embraced with acceptance and love.
Mhm.
Um, Even if there's disagreement, all those sorts of things, that's when suddenly a community has this ability to feed your soul in ways you can't possibly imagine. What about you? Have you had little moments where you've experienced that?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, just hearing what you were sharing, it sounds like you were talking about it's going to be difficult. There's going to be, you have to hold things in tension. To stay in community, to be anchored in community, you have to work through some of those some of those challenging things. But for you, it sounded like those relationships are a big part of what helped you work through those challenges and to stay committed to community when those things got tough, because it wasn't just like this abstract value of, yeah, community is good. Yeah, I should like keep working on this or keep growing or whatever. It was the relationships themselves that you had with the rest of the body that helps you keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think interestingly, like when probably the biggest gift to a soul besides the love of God is when the love of God is embodied in another human being.
Yeah.
So the love of God is unfathomable. We don't have any other comparison to it. There is no human relationship that could compare to the unconditional love that Jesus shows. I've never encountered it, and I don't think you ever could.
Right.
Because it's that pure, and that's one of the reasons why the gospel is so good.
Right.
But as that gospel transforms individuals' lives and communities' lives, that community starts to get to experience the embodied love of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how good it is to be a mess and still be embraced with acceptance. It doesn't make any sense. There's songs about that. There's no categories in our brain. It doesn't make sense why I could be actually me and people would still like me, because when I'm actually me, it's not very pretty. And when I'm in my darkest, most broken places, you feel like you can conquer the whole world. You feel like you can face any challenge if you have both the love of God and at least some small group of people who see all of the broken and still love you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a gift. So, yeah. There's a few things that I didn't get a chance to talk about more at the series level. I don't know if we want to dive into some of that, but I think one of the things that I was fascinated about as I was studying for the series, and you're preaching in this series too, so I don't know if
I
you've
am in
had
a couple weeks. Yeah.
I'm super excited about that. But I've noticed this shift, and I'm not the first person to notice. There's this massive shift in human history that takes place from more corporate thinking societies to more individualistic thinking societies. And there's still in the third world and a lot of more warm culture societies, they still tend to think more corporately. One example is Bob Andrews, one of our missionary partners that we support here at South. On Sunday, someone told me they went out to lunch with him, and he said, "This sermon is unnecessary in Africa." Because
Right.
he serves there, because they just get it. Like, they're like, well, duh, obviously community. They don't know how to not think that way.
Right. Whereas here you have to like make a case for no, this is really worthwhile.
Exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of the study I did for the series was studying how humans have or the Western world has shifted away from that corporate thought to more individualistic thought. Waves of the Enlightenment,
right?
The scientific revolution, the secular revolution, and then, and so I think the reason I bring that up is I think it's really important for all of us as we engage the series for the weeks to come, and each of our episodes that we'll have both on the Red Couch and in sermons, that we're entering into foreign territory for an American mind, especially, or a Western mind. So if there's tension there and you're like, I don't know how to retain this feels so foreign to me, especially in the area of community, just know you can't buy hook, line, and sinker the individualistic tendencies that are in your own brain. It's not a universal truth that we all get to just do whatever we want, and that the American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not the gospel.
Yeah.
The gospel's the gospel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good that's come out of the American dream and the concept of liberty, which is how I started the message on Sunday. But it is not a universal truth that works everywhere in the world now. And it's antithetical to a lot of what the New Testament teaches, especially about human relationships and community. So I wanted to acknowledge that out loud again. I did a little bit of that on Sunday, but it's important to not be too skeptical of the New Testament's ideas when they conflict with your American values. So,
right. And I mean, I think both studies, like scientific research studies, and just anecdotal evidence that we're seeing more and more of is, extreme individualism and the isolation that we enter into when that is our main frame of reference. That's not ultimately that good for us. Like there's more and more emotional, mental health, social consequences that we're seeing and can point to the evidence of what we're seeing as, okay, at some point there's a point where this turns like really unhealthy and really negative.
Yeah, and as the rise of technology is increased in the Western world especially, but it's globally, but social media and access to information out. So you have the internet was this massive wave. There have been ones prior to this, but the internet is this massive wave of an environment that an individual person can sit in solitude and access the world. Visually, the ideas of the world, consume media that makes them feel like they're in, like experiencing things related to the world, and then not actually be in community. And as technology grows and AI grows and there's better and better visual and all of these sorts of things, it's going to be, technology is going to constantly threaten us and our well-being by giving us a false sense of community that doesn't actually fit the real place of human interaction.
Right.
So there's this book that some of our community members went through last year called The Anxious Generation that talks extensively about the social media movement and how that's affecting young kids and stuff and brain development. And one of the biggest problems with social media is that it's not actually social.
Right.
And that there's all sorts of studies about brain science related to like being able to read people's body language and all this stuff that you just can't get in social media. And so and I think honestly, a lot of the developers of social networks had good intentions to try and connect humans.
Sure.
And it's whiplashed, and it makes you think that you're connected without any of the actual benefits of connection.
Yeah.
And it's proving to be one of the worst things for all sorts of reasons. There's bullying online. There's this sense of seeing the best of other people's lives and then feeling like you're not part of that. Depression's on the rise because of it. Even like intimate relationships between men and women, like men and women can have these like fantasy relationships online in various different ways, and they think that it's filling this physiological and mental and emotional need without actually the good and the beautiful that comes from wrestling through a deep intimate relationship with another person. And so this challenge of truly being anchored in actual physical relationships with other human beings, it's just going to go up.
Right.
As technology improves. So we have to fight to preserve it, anchor to it, say, I refuse to play the game and I exit the human system and enter into this virtual world system. If we don't anchor to that, it's just not possible to thrive as human beings. We weren't designed for that. So anything else? Any other questions you had? I don't think we had any questions come in. I'll just double check.
Oh, yeah. For future episodes, you can submit questions to redcouchtheology.com.
Yeah, redcouchtheology.com is the Is there a question? We got a
Maybe.
question. I didn't even
Awesome.
see this.
Submit your questions to redcouchtheology.com, and maybe they will be seen before.
I don't think we've
episode.
missed any yet, but this is the first. Okay, so let me look over this here. So I use this illustration on Sunday. Let me just. Sometimes I like to not read the whole question because they have anonymous sections to them. But I use this illustration of being in the same body of water on Sunday. If we're all in the same body of water or pool, why can't denominations of churches work better together for God's glory? Certain issues, I need to get this a little bit closer to me so I can actually read it. Certain issues are certainly in the die bucket, but with the most important issues of Jesus being our Savior and the way of truth and life, why is there such division amongst the similar denominations? Dig in, because there should be no divisions in the body. So that's a reference to the passage that I preached on.
Right.
From that stance of leaving a church due to a lack of leadership or poor discernment, this hits hard. How do you show up in a community when you have frustrations with members within that community? So we address part of this.
There's like two questions there of, okay, if we're all supposed to be one body of Christ, what's the deal with denominations? Why can't the church get its act together and have less division? Right.
Yeah.
And what do you do in a specific local body when you are frustrated with other members of that body?
Yeah. That's a great question. So similar to maybe whoever's writing this question, I don't know. We don't see who writes them in by default. I could look it up, theoretically, but whoever's writing this question, I was super frustrated with this reality that there's all this fracture that took place in the church. A lot of it driven by the Reformation, and that sort of giving the scriptures in the hands of the average person, and they start to be able to interpret themselves, and then they say, "Well, wait a minute, I don't agree with my pastor," and then they whatever. So,
and some of those various shifts of community to individual, but borne out on community levels or group levels of, okay, well, then we're gonna split off and form this denomination or that denomination because we don't have to stick with it over various reasons. Some more legitimate than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that still frustrates me to some extent, but I'm actually a little bit more comforted in my church history class recently. The term denominations actually comes from a specific season where there was, I think it's the 16-year war, but there's some theological debates over communion, some nuanced details around, does the body and blood actually turn into the body and blood of Jesus or not, and all this stuff. And those debates were so heated that there's literally a war where Christians are killing other claim to be Christians over a theological debate.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't make any sense to most of us today.
Right.
But
and probably shouldn't have been the outcome of that debate, regardless.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Now, in order to sort of put yourself in their shoes, you'd have to study a little bit of what's going on at the time in church history. I think if we were living in that day, we would probably be participating in some of the same stuff. Because if you think that your eternal safety, your eternal salvation is contingent upon whether you get this theological thing right or not, your motivation to get it right goes so high that you're willing to go to war for it. It's your eternal state, right? So that's what's going on. And eventually there was like a little bit of a ceasefire, and they came together for a council, and the two parties, and they decide to separate without killing each other. This is not the first, but this is where the term denomination came into being, where they said, is there a way for us to agree to disagree without murdering each other? And that's actually the beginning of denominationalism. Agreed. Let's find ways to disagree theologically really strongly without murdering our opponent.
Right.
That's so now we've come a long way from that place.
Right. Now we just write blog posts and
write blog posts, all this. So
make Twitter comments.
That doesn't mean it's ideal.
Yeah.
We want the body of Christ to be unified globally. That's where Jesus is going to take us long term.
Mm-hmm.
But human brokenness is such that there are some issues that are so big and so painful and so strongly held that those parties who are on either side of these lines, it's actually more detrimental to the well-being of the whole for them to spend time together. So there is some justification for some separation across some lines. And the biggest problem is we can't agree on which lines are worth separating over versus others.
Right. Yeah.
And South has what we call our hills to die on. And there are fewer hills maybe in a community like South than in some other communities. Mm-hmm. But that's the source of denominationalism. It comes out of human beings are broken mm-hmm. and we can't get along. And it's better to not murder each other than to spend time together. Now, this is also the reason why Jesus says, this is kind of the same way Jesus talks about divorce.
Because not that it's a good thing, but it's because of
he says
our brokenness.
This is not how it was meant to be. That's what Jesus says about divorce.
Yeah.
I do not like this ever. But because of your hardness of heart, because of human brokenness, there are some ways where it's not damnable, for lack of a better term, to separate a marriage. For the sake of the safety of one or both, for the sake of the thriving of a family, there are some reasons why a divorce is actually better for all parties involved. Same thing with denominations. And it stinks, and let's fight against it when we can. If we can find common ground, great, because it's going to be the end game.
Right.
There's no divorce and marriage. There's no separation of God's global church in the new heavens and new earth. So we might as well start figuring it out now. But there are going to be times, because of our weakness and our hardness of heart and our brokenness, that it has to happen. So that's the first question. That's a long answer. Any other thoughts on that part for you?
No, I mean, I'll just say, again, that's not to say we just accept it and just shrug our shoulders. And I think of one of our ministry partners, Love Inc. They work with dozens of churches in the Littleton area across denominations and regularly bring people from those churches together in one space, or to work on a project, or to help a family, or those kind of things. And when denominations do come together, when the church whole comes together across those lines, it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And it's a consistent reminder of there are some spaces where those lines are being crossed and those divides are being bridged. And it's a shame that doesn't happen more often.
Absolutely. Yep. It's not ideal. It's just kind of how it is. There's so much in the scriptures that talk about that this is not what it's supposed to be like. And because of our brokenness, it is. And so let's fight against the brokenness, fight against the disunity, but at the same time, it's just how it currently is in a fallen world.
And I guess on an individual level, for those things that you see them and you have that reaction of, this is not how this should be. This is not how God called the church to be. This is not how God called a community to be. That I think can also raise the question of, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right. And depending on the situation, it might not just depend on you fully to resolve the situation. You can't necessarily make people respond in super healthy ways.
Yeah.
Right. But to the extent where you are called to do something, whether that's like get involved in figuring out how your community can bridge some of those divides of denomination. Whether that's how do you broker peace and be a peacemaker, not necessarily peacekeeper, but a peacemaker in your community. Where do you need to maybe go have a conversation with someone or ask for forgiveness that will help restore how that community should be? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What is God calling you to do in that situation? And sometimes maybe it's just pray, depending again on what the situation is, and who else is involved.
Yeah.
But the answer is not usually just like, that sucks.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep. Yeah. Good luck with that. If you figure out the perfect formula, I'm sure we would love to know. But it's a complicated thing to deal with. And again, I think the scriptures, that's one of the reasons why I love the Bible, is I think the Bible deals with these complicated issues with such honesty, acknowledges the ideal and the brokenness at the same time. And that's why I think it's so true. One of the reasons why I think the scriptures are so powerful and so true is that it's able to see both of those realities simultaneously. To get to the second part of the question, I think we partially answered it already in the way that I addressed the first thing, but when should you break community? I do not know for you. That's a pretty difficult question to answer. And I think what Jessica said earlier about like her experience, or what I was talking about earlier, it's got to be done with some fear and trepidation, lots of prayer, lots of consideration. I'll just tell one story to sort of get at it. When I first started at South, I'm the worship pastor, and that was all I was doing at the time. But I used to, you get complaints about you're doing too many old hymns or not enough old hymns, or like the music's too loud, the music's too soft. Like this is the kind of thing, like all these impossible to please situations. Now, I tended to hear a little bit more complaints from some of our older members than I did from younger folks. And at first, I was like, why can't the older generation stop complaining about this stuff? Again, I'm really young. Just hang with me. I feel the judgment coming through the screen. And I was at first, in the first year or so, I was like, I just hear mostly complaints from this older generation. I'm trying to be faithful to Jesus. I'm trying to lead my teams well, select songs that serve the church, and I'm just hearing complaints. But then I started to notice some of the younger folks who weren't complaining disappearing without saying a word. And then I had some conversations with some mentors, and I started to realize that some of the older folks who were staying and complaining were doing community better than the silent departers. And my affection for that generation and that model of being in community grew so much because of that. And I started to realize they might complain because they love this place and they want it to thrive and they want it to be the best it can be. But they're staying even if I don't change something for their preference. That's beautiful. And my respect for the person who just never says a word and just silently slips out the back door because they didn't like the song selection that week went way down. So we have to wrestle with, like, if we're going to be in community and we don't like what's going on and we've never said a thing about it or engaged it or had a conversation with the lead pastor or the elder board or whatever, and we've never engaged it at all, and we just said, it just feels a little icky to me right now, it's not doing it for me anymore, then your commitment to that community is not strong enough. That doesn't mean that there aren't justifications for it, but if you go through the process of saying, I'm invested here, I love this place, I want it to thrive, and I'm frustrated with how certain things are happening, so I'm going to have the conversations. I'm going to, with love, as best as I can, complain. about how things are and trying to make a new future for my church family, and it's met with arrogance or bullheadedness from leadership or whatever it may be, you may decide that there's a reason why, and it becomes toxic or you become villainized or whatever it may be. You may decide, okay, I is in the presence of God. I've done everything I can to be at peace in my community and to make this community, to bring my gifts to it, and it's still not working. Then maybe the only option is for you to find a place that hears your voice.
Yeah.
That lets you be part of the body again. I don't know if that answers the question, but again, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I think it's, again, not knowing like individual details of a situation, right? Yeah, try to change, try to have conversations. And in the end, the answer might be like, there's not a fix. You can't bring something to health. But without trying, you're never gonna know if things could have been changed for the better in a way that reflects and honors Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess by way of concluding related to this topic and just to wrap up the show for today, if that's you and you feel like you need to move on, or you're coming to South and grieving the fact that, you heard a message. I actually talked to one person on Sunday who's like, I just left the church and I came here and I'm finding some life, but now I have this grief that did I try enough and all this stuff. So the invitation for this text and I'm hoping for this episode and the sermon is that you need to be in community. So whether you had to leave or whatever, this isn't about shame or whatever. Just know, keep trying. Find a place inside of the body of Christ where you're known, you're valued, you're loved, even if it's hard and complicated, and if you can't find it here, find it somewhere. The big risk to your soul is if you just tap out and say, I'm no longer trying to be part of the body of Christ. That is a recipe to stagnate your faith and stagnate thriving ultimately.
And if you're looking for a way to get connected in the body of South, you can reach out to myself or Angela Dunn, because that's our job. And we would love to help you find what some of those pathways and options might be.
Yeah. And this fall, we're going to be offering some midweek class options and some like sort of mid-sized groups that allow us to experiment, dip our toes in the water of community and what that looks like in some shorter cycle classes that may be where you meet some of the people you'll go deeper with longer term. So you can be looking out for that. Circles in the summer is a great way to sort of like just try a little bit, or do something, join a serve group, whatever. All these sorts of environments are places where you can take a baby step in the right direction of entering into community. So we love you all. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
And thanks for joining me, Jessica, today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hopefully I didn't ramble you guys' ears off too much. I'm not used to being the one that talks the whole time. So now I have to find the stop button. Every single week, I don't have the stop button ready, and I talk and talk and talk until I can find it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.